Shalom position determines access. Episode 21 of Torah Mastery. Before we begin, I want to say something that I say to every student who sits with me for the first time. The Torah is not a collection of stories. It is not a book of inspiration. It is a precise architectural document describing the laws by which creation operates. When you read it as literature, you receive literature. When you read it as law, you receive the keys to structure. Today, we are reading it as law. In the previous 20 episodes of this series, we have established foundational principles. Structure determines outcome. Consistency determines direction. Leverage determines scale. Constraint creates power. Sequence determines success. Each of these is a governing law beneath the surface of visible events. Today, we add the next law. Not a principle about effort, not a principle about motivation, a law about position. The law is this: position determines access. Let me say that again slowly because it is not something you absorb in one pass. Position determines access. What you can receive, what you can influence, what you can steward, what you can build, is not determined primarily by how hard you work or how much you desire something. It is determined by where you are positioned within a structure. This is a difficult teaching for modern minds because we live inside a culture that has deeply romanticized effort. Work harder, push further, desire it more intensely. And while effort is real and necessary, effort without correct positioning does not produce access. It produces exhaustion. The exhausted person asks why their effort is not rewarded. The Torah answers that question differently than most people expect. Let us begin at the beginning, literally. When the Torah describes creation, it does not describe a random scattering of elements. It describes a precise architectural sequence in which every element is placed within a specific position, and that position determines its function. The sun does not illuminate because it desires to illuminate. It illuminates because it occupies the position in creation assigned to govern the day. The moon does not reflect because it is ambitious. It reflects because it occupies the position assigned to govern the night. The waters do not nourish the earth because they push against it. They nourish it because they are positioned above and below in a structural relationship that makes nourishment possible. Remove any element from its assigned position, and the function ceases, not because the element lacks quality or effort, because function is an expression of position. This is not metaphor. This is structural law embedded into the architecture of existence from the first moment of creation. The land produces vegetation. Why? Not because the soil wants to produce, but because the land occupies the position within creation's structure where production of that kind is possible. When we understand this, we begin to see something that most people completely miss. The Torah is teaching us from the very first chapters that access to function, access to productivity, access to influence follows position. Everything else follows from this. Now let us move from the cosmic to the human. Let us look at Yosef. Yosef is one of the most carefully documented case studies in Torah of a person navigating position within structure. We are told he was gifted. We are told he dreamed with unusual clarity. We are told his father loved him. None of these things gave him access. His gifts were present long before his access was present. What changed was not his quality. What changed was his position. Follow the sequence carefully. Yosef begins in his father's household. His position there gives him access to certain things: family relationship, his father's favor, his own perception of future greatness. But it does not give him access to the administrative, economic, or political structures that his dreams pointed toward. The gifts were real. The position had not yet aligned with the responsibility those gifts required. He is sold into Egypt. He is placed in Potiphar's house. Notice what happens. The Torah tells us that everything Potiphar placed in Joseph's hand prospered, not because Joseph suddenly became more gifted. He was gifted before. But now he is positioned within an administrative structure. His gifts meet a structural position that allows them to operate. Potiphar recognizes this and elevates him. Joseph is now managing the entire household. He has access he did not have before, not because his character changed, because his position changed. Then comes the imprisonment, and here is where the teaching becomes precise, because most people read the prison as a setback, as something to survive. Torah students reading through the lens of structural law see something different. Prison is the next level of preparation. In prison, Joseph manages the other prisoners. He is positioned, even in confinement, within a structure of responsibility. He interprets dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. He is building relational connections into the court of Pharaoh without yet having access to it. He is occupying a structural position that is adjacent to the next level without yet being inside it. Then Pharaoh dreams, and the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And here is the moment. Joseph is brought before Pharaoh, not because he pushed his way in, not because he networked aggressively, not because he refused to stay in his position, because the structural sequence had completed its preparation. Every prior position had given him something he needed to occupy the next one. Prison gave him something that Potiphar's house could not, and Potiphar's house gave him something that his father's tent could not. Position by position, the access expanded. When Joseph stands before Pharaoh and interprets the dream, Pharaoh immediately recognizes that this man has something the others do not, and Pharaoh places him at the highest administrative position in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Why? Because Joseph is now aligned with the position that matches his level of preparation and the scale of responsibility that awaits him. The access that comes in that moment, the access to Egypt's entire economic apparatus, to the ability to preserve nations, to the eventual reunion with his family, none of that was accessible from his father's tent. It required the exact sequence of positions through which he had passed. This is the Torah framework made visible in a life. Position precedes influence. Influence precedes responsibility. Responsibility precedes authority. Authority precedes expansion. Now let us look at Moshe. Moshe is born in a position of absolute structural vulnerability. Hebrew baby in Egypt under a decree of death. His first repositioning is into Pharaoh's own household. Notice that the Torah does not tell us this was an accident. It was arranged through a sequence of events that placed Moshe into the center of Egyptian power. Growing up inside Pharaoh's house gave him something he could not have received otherwise. He learned the architecture of empire from the inside. He understood how courts function, how decisions are made, how power is structured. He had access to that knowledge because he occupied that position. Then he sees the oppression of his people and acts impulsively. He kills the Egyptian, and he loses his position. He flees to Midian. Many readers of Torah see this as failure. The structural reading sees something else. Moshe's Egyptian palace preparation was necessary but not sufficient. He needed another kind of preparation. In Midian, at the well, he again intervenes on behalf of the vulnerable. He is placed in Yitro's household. He becomes a shepherd. He spends 40 years shepherding in the wilderness. Why 40 years? Why not 10? Why not 2? Because the position of shepherd in the wilderness was giving him something that could not be rushed. The patience, the precision of attention, the ability to navigate environments without roads or structures, the capacity to sustain responsibility for living creatures across vast, unknowing spaces. These are not gifts you receive from a lecture. They develop through sustained occupancy of a position that demands them. When Moshe encounters the burning bush, he is not a young man eager for greatness. He is 80 years old. He has been shaped by every position he has occupied. Egypt gave him the architecture of power. Midian gave him the architecture of patience and precision. Together, they prepare a man capable of standing before Pharaoh not as a supplicant, but as an equal, capable of leading millions through a wilderness, capable of receiving Torah at Sinai. What would have happened if Moshe had attempted to bypass Midian? If he had stayed in Egypt and forced his way into leadership without the preparation of those 40 years? The Torah does not entertain that possibility because structurally it is impossible. The access that came at the burning bush was not available to the man who existed before Midian. The positions shaped the person. The person could then occupy the responsibility. The responsibility unlocked the authority. The authority enabled the expansion. This is architectural law, not inspiration, not motivation, law. Let us briefly consider David. David is anointed as a young man. Samuel pours the oil. The selection is made, and then David goes back to shepherding. He does not march into Saul's court and announce his anointing. He occupies the position that is actually his at that moment, shepherd. Then he is brought to play music for Saul. Now he is positioned within the court as a musician. His access expands slightly. He is inside the structure. He is learning it from the inside. Then Goliath appears, and David defeats him. His position shifts again. He becomes a military leader, but Saul turns against him. And David spends years in the wilderness, hunted. Most people looking from outside would say David's story had broken down. Torah students reading structurally see that the wilderness years are doing something essential. They are giving David the experience of leading in difficulty. Every person who joins him in the wilderness, every challenge he navigates, every time he chooses not to harm Saul when the opportunity was present, these are building the interior architecture of a king. David does not seize the throne. He waits until the structure opens the position to him. When he is anointed king, the years of preparation mean he does not collapse under the weight of the authority. The position shaped the capacity. The capacity received the authority. The authority was then legitimate because it was structurally built, not forcefully seized. Now let us move to the domain of learning and mastery, because this principle operates in the classroom just as precisely as it does in the court. In Torah learning, there is a concept deeply embedded in the tradition that knowledge is not simply information transmitted from teacher to student. It is access granted to a student who has occupied the correct structural position. This is why there is sequence in Torah education. You do not begin with Talmud. You begin with foundational texts. You develop certain faculties of mind and character before access to deeper material becomes possible. This is not elitism, it is architecture. The deeper layers of Torah learning are not withheld from students as a punishment or a test of worthiness in some social sense. They are structurally inaccessible to a mind that has not been shaped by the prior levels. The student who demands access to advanced learning before occupying the foundational positions is not being prevented from learning by an external authority. The structure itself does not open to a mind unprepared to receive it. The great teachers of every generation understood this. They did not give students what they asked for. They gave students what the structural position they occupied could actually receive and integrate. A student positioned at an early level of understanding who receives advanced knowledge does not gain wisdom. they gain confusion. Because access requires alignment between position and material. This is why learning plateaus are often misdiagnosed. The student who has stopped growing in their learning typically believes they need to work harder, read more texts, find a better teacher. Occasionally, all of these are true, but more often, the plateau is a structural signal. It is saying that advancement is not available from the current position. Something needs to shift in the architecture of the student's understanding before the next level opens. The question to ask in a learning plateau is not, "What am I missing?" It is, "Where am I positioned, and does my position align with what I am trying to access?" Now let us address the common misunderstandings about position, because this teaching is frequently distorted. The first misunderstanding is that position is about status. It is not. Status is a social perception. Position is a structural reality. A person can have high social status and be positioned incorrectly within a structure for the function they are attempting to perform. Conversely, a person can have low social status and be perfectly positioned within the structure for extraordinary access. Joseph in prison had no status. He had position. David in the wilderness had no status. He had position. Status is exterior. Position is structural. The second misunderstanding is that position is about ego or self-promotion. This confuses positioning with ambition. They are not the same. Positioning is about understanding where within a structure you are, and whether that position aligns with the function you are attempting to fulfill. Ego attempts to claim a position through force or declaration. Structural positioning is about genuine alignment between capacity, responsibility, and role. Moshe did not want the position he received. He argued with the Creator about his suitability. His humility was not a performance. It reflected a genuine understanding that position carries weight that ego cannot bear. The third and perhaps most practically damaging misunderstanding is that proximity equals position. This is critically important to understand. Being near someone who holds a position is not the same as occupying that position yourself. Many people mistake proximity to power for participation in power. The advisor who stands next to the king is not the king. The student who learns from the greatest teacher has not yet become what the teacher is. Proximity provides exposure. Exposure provides potential. But position requires the full occupancy of responsibility, not simply the observation of it. When people operate from proximity as though it were position, the consequences are predictable. They attempt to access results that belong to a different structural layer. They speak with authority they have not yet earned through responsibility. They expect influence without having built the relational and functional infrastructure that makes influence legitimate, and they experience frustration that they cannot account for, because from their perspective they are doing everything right. This frustration is one of the clearest signals in a person's experience that they are occupying the wrong structural layer. When effort is high and access remains low, before concluding that the system is unfair or that you are simply not capable, consider the architectural question. Are you positioned within the structure at the level that corresponds to what you are attempting to access? This is not a cruel question. It is a clarifying one, because the answer points toward a path forward. If you are not yet positioned for the access you want, the path forward is not to try harder from the wrong position. It is to identify what position you actually occupy and fulfill its responsibilities completely. Because complete fulfillment of your current position is what unlocks movement into the next one. Yosef managed Potiphar's house with total integrity. He did not cut corners because the position felt beneath him. He did not operate in Potiphar's house as though he were already second to Pharaoh. He occupied the position he actually held with full responsibility, and that fulfillment is what qualified him for the next position. Moshe shepherded the flocks with the same attention he would later give to leading Israel. David served in Saul's court and later led the men who joined him in the wilderness with the same integrity he would bring to the throne. In every case, complete fulfillment of the current position prepared the capacity for the next one. This is the complete framework. You identify your actual structural position. You fulfill its responsibilities completely and precisely. Complete fulfillment of current responsibilities establishes the capacity for the next level. The next position opens based on structural readiness, not desire or assertion. At the new position, influence expands. Expanded influence comes with increased responsibility. Fulfilled responsibility produces legitimate authority, and authority, rightly held, enables expansion. Effort without position produces exhaustion. This is not a criticism of effort. Effort is necessary. But effort applied from within a misaligned position does not produce the access that effort from within a correctly aligned position produces. The same effort, the same quality, the same desire, operating from a structurally correct position produces results that seem disproportionate to observers who do not understand the law. This is why some people seem to accomplish extraordinary things with what appears to be modest effort, and others exhaust themselves with no result. It is not that one person is more deserving or more talented. It is that one person is positioned correctly within the structure for the function they are performing. The structure itself provides leverage when the position is correct. That leverage makes the effort productive in ways that effort alone never can. Position determines access, not because reality is unfair, because structure is precise. The Creator built a world in which function follows position. The sun governs the day because it occupies the day's position. Joseph administered Egypt because he had moved through every position that prepared him for that access. Moshe led Israel because every prior position had built the interior architecture that leadership required. David ruled as king because the wilderness years had made him someone who could bear authority without being corrupted by it. And you, whoever you are listening to this, whatever structure you are operating within, whether it is a family, a community, a business, an institution, a learning structure, your access is determined by your position, not by your desires, not by your effort alone, not by what you believe you deserve, by where you are positioned within the structure and whether your position is aligned with genuine responsibility. The question to carry from this episode is not how do I get more access? That question leads to frustration. The question is, where am I actually positioned, and am I fulfilling the responsibilities of that position with complete integrity? Position precedes influence. Influence precedes authority. Authority precedes expansion. Access follows position. This has been episode 21. The law continues.